Yo, 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 what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. Today is going to be Unfiltered Day. We're going to go hard in the paint. Of course, we're going to keep it PG 13, just so that way we don't get demonetized. But today we're going to touch on what's happening in Server 79, how pretty much everything has finally come to a boil and has exploded. It's wild. There's a lot of stuff happening. We're definitely going to extend our courtesy of showing that the grass wasn't greener on the other side. So we're going to show you and give you a little bit of TLDR prefacing on what's happening currently. I'll show you some messages from some Discord chats, public ones. And then I'll also play you a few audio clippings from our big meeting that happened on January 4th when I had announced everything after essentially being forced out and the mutiny occurred. So before we get started, as always, make sure if you enjoy the content, sub, like, ring the notification bell, and if you want to be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord, which you can also find in the pinned comment and description down below. All right, so what's actually happening now in 79? Well, like I said, everything has pretty much come to a boil. The council has been dissolved from what we've heard. This has been corroborated by a few other people, and it's pretty much every alliance for themselves. World chat is going bananas right now, and with that being said, let's tell you what is going on. After that. So before they had dissolved, and it's pretty much at this point everyone for themselves. I mean, you have some alliances now that are taking other alliances' cities. I think there was, let me see. I think FSS ended up taking Fate, one or two Fate cities from what we had just seen, and now you have LS, right, who's pretty much the rogue alliance here. Initially at the time, you can see them right number 8 right now at 21. They were, I think, more so around like 15, 20 at one point. And for the longest time before I was forced out, they had one person, right, which was Legman, pretty much the number one consistent guy who was just constantly fighting and attacking people kind of, day in, day out. And a few people that had come and gone through the alliance, but no one really consistent like he has been more or less since early on in the server's history. Then, after January 4th, when I made my announcement, I stepped down, and now you have this new council, this new regime, right, or this new basically leadership team that is now 100% accountable, 100% responsible. Everything that they wanted is pretty much on them. It's now their job, right? They are now, will be looked upon as the people who will pretty much govern the server and make decisions, right? So they pretty much have to be able to do just as good of a job, if not a better job, in whatever capacity they plan to go in, where they can have the server thriving as much as, if not more than, I was, right? Because remember, where I left off is that the kingdom was number 8, right? Ranked number 8 on the server top 25 list. And let me see here if I can actually find this. I think I was actually searching this up. This would just be nice to show, just for anyone who is curious on this. Okay, so here we go. So here's the list. I'm going to briefly show it to you just so we can show some numbers here. So you can see server 79, right, was number 8. They were at 538 mil, right, 538.5 mil for the top 6 combined. After I did a recent calculation for the top 6, they're now negative 53 million since then. It might be negative 54 by now. I haven't done one. I think I did it yesterday when I was just checking. So they've gone down in power and have not increased power as far as getting, more people coming in or sustaining and retaining players to where those numbers are increasing, right? And there have already been people that have migrated out, unfortunately, where you're in a situation now that you are. So let's talk about kind of what is some of that opposition. So you got some people here in LS who are some of these rogue players, right? You got Flock who's 7, Kana here is 12. There's about 8 or 9 here within the top 100. But then when we look at Honor, there's a lot of people here at the top of LS. Again, a lot of these LS players are here. And there's about 19, I think, or so that are within the top 100 for Lord Honor. Number 100 bubbles out at about 4.9 mil for Honor. And so they have just been, again, they've added 20, 30, 40 players since then that have just been really more active rogue players, more active PvP fighters that are just going around and attacking players on the kingdom since I left, was forced out. And so that's one area. The second area is that they've gone negative in power. The third area is that the council has dissolved and is pretty much every alliance for themselves. And the fourth one, which is arguably the most important, is that the original people, which we're going to show you real quick. So if we go and we take a look again, right, the original people that arguably voted me out of my position, was a suggestion that came here, even though it wasn't worded as such. It basically is, if you've watched one of the old videos, is essentially what happened is that you had, from what they said, what they had claimed at the time between multiple officers and leads, is that up to 37 players, which included all of these leads that we're going to show off here in a moment, and then the officers were in a separate backroom server talking about how there were things that they felt that I wasn't doing well, or I could have done better, ways to help in what they said, right? Help with the workload. They wanted to take the kind of final call, final decision power away from me that was only ever a if needed or at discretion to be used. And at the time of when this happened on January 4th, from my knowledge, and a couple other people had corroborated this as well, I don't believe that there ever was even a single moment where I was making a decision or had came out and said, like, yeah, we're doing this and we're going in this direction and we're not going to listen or take in anyone's thoughts. We're not going to have any kind of think take or back and forth. One of the main reasons why, and this is something I just don't even know how many of them might even know or be familiar with this, because it is something that they should know because it's been said multiple times, is that we plan a lot of things ahead of time, right? So there's a lot of things that we'll plan ahead and we'll tell people, hey, we're going to do these things, like in the jump project phase, right? We'll tell people, hey, we're going to manage it this way. We're going to do events this way. We're going to do PvP this way. So the bulk of things that are being implemented have just already been discussed beforehand, right? For the group that's coming in to then manage the server after we're able to get majority presence and kind of control. So that's first and foremost. But you have the people here, and I'm just going to show some of the names, right? You got Ryanka, who was KGBF, Manef, who was Fate, Wolf, who was FSS, Embla, who was FSM, Pip, who was Fassi, I think. And so, again, right, you have these 5 leads outside of myself, because I was the 6th lead, who already kind of came in, already had these discussions, had the votes loaded already in the back pocket. And that's when I decided, you know what, dude, like the trust, the faith, the loyalty has all been lost at this point, right, because of how they went about doing it. And let me also just state that all of these things that they had mentioned on there were never once brought to my attention. We never once had a meeting or a council member said, hey guys, let's set up a voice meeting that we can have, so we can all talk about some things, right? Just kind of theory craft, shoot some ideas out. None of that ever happened. So it is a little interesting to me to now see how they basically failed the server. And I want to say that in as much of a respectful way as I can, because you have these individuals, and I'm sure, and it's interesting because I wonder how many of you have had a similar situation, or you've seen a similar situation in another kingdom or server that you've played in, where you saw that the server was, for all intensive purposes, going well, if not going in a good direction. And then all of a sudden, the people in leadership or in management are taken out, a new regime comes in, and now things are just not going as well as they are, right? You start noticing little things here at the start. Over time, you notice more things, and then you start realizing, why was this person or these people removed, when now what's happening is just a lesser efficient version of what was being done before, right? A worse version of what was being done before. And so that's basically what has happened, is that you had a group of people who got together, and instead of just asking, hey, boss, is there something I can help you with? Hey, is there something that we can assist? Can we, help lighten your load? What do you need us to do? Instead of that, it was, oh no, we know what isn't being done. We know what boss isn't doing. We know that he's working too hard, right? It's like, man, these people know more about me than I do. It's wild. And then you get to the situation you're in now, which is you went through that whole mutiny thing when the server was going great. It was on an upward trajectory, right? From the numbers, the stats we showed, to now being in the situation you're in now, right? Now, I don't know if karma is going to hit. I don't know if there's going to be a level of self-awareness, or, maybe the people that were involved in that are just going to double down and we're just going to kind of keep this vein of ignorance, so to speak, on believing that everything they did was still right, when clearly when we look at the visual stats and how things have played out from then up until now, it's clear that they haven't. That's obviously going to take a level of I don't want to say diminishing, but kind of pushing the pride aside to be able to admit something like that. Again, I know it because I already knew it the moment that it happened. The moment that I saw that the posting council that we showed a little while ago was made, I pretty much already saw the future of the kingdom. And it was something that I told them was essentially the highest percentage chance of what was going to happen. And it did. And now, for the most part, from what I'm hearing, more people, there are some more people that are leaving. But I want to kind of go through and show a few things, and I want you guys to listen to a couple things here as well, because I think this will give you some good insight into what the thought process was. And then I'll do some explaining, and then we'll go through some chat history too as well, right? So let me, if I can, just so I can hear as well while we're going. So what I'm going to pull up now for you is going to be and I have to remember because I have some timestamps here too. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go over here, right? So this is for the meeting that we had, right? You can see here it's Town Hall, the big one, that's listed at the top, right? So so I'm going to go to 30. So I'm only going to play a couple, right? And I didn't actually listen to this. I didn't re-listen to it all the way through. It's a lot. And so let me go through, I think I'm at 28. So I'm going to go ahead and let this play for a little bit. There's a couple that we're just going to play, maybe 3 or 4, not too many. But it will give you the bulk idea, pretty much, that is said in the fewest amount of words.
Nobody wanted you to 100% step down. They just wanted more of a voice and action in leadership. It's not like nobody wants you to step down 100%. Like you're amazing at recruitment. Nobody can say anything about that. I don't know. This all just seems very, very drastic of a step after the things that I at least know have been discussed. But like nobody's asking you to leave the server or abandon any part of the project or anything like that. We just want to more or less you set the mission statement for everything. Tell us where you would like to go, and then let us manage from our standpoint the forward action of that.
Okay, so let me pause it there real quick, right? So there's 2 big things that were mentioned there. One, they don't want me to step down. They just want the other people to have from what they felt, right, more of a voice, more heard. So one of the things that we touched on, and I know we talked about before, is about some people, and again, this is where the challenge comes in, because who knows what the other council members, the other leads, are telling their officers, right? In this case, Mouse was an officer, and the interesting part is I don't know what they're telling them, right? But this was something that we talked about in this meeting, and I'll just give you a brief example. Like, I'm just going to show you a very small thing here to show you how much, and I want to say BS because it really is, but I'm going to show you and prove to the people out there that that is anything but. And I have never heard from any of the leads, Ghost can corroborate this, any of the leads that were there, I've never heard them tell me one time that they feel like they're not heard, that I'm never open to having a conversation with them, that I'm never willing to talk to them. If you know me, you know that it doesn't matter if you're Joe Schmo. You message me and you're like, hey, boss, I'd love to talk to you one time. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's chat. Come meet me in voice. I mean, it's that easy for me, right? If I have time, or when I do, I'll always sit down and talk to anyone. It doesn't matter if you're just a brand new player or you've been playing for years, right? Anyone who's ever talked to me, or if you've ever reached out to me and asked me that, you know. But let me show you something real quick that is going to hammer this point home. So here's the council chat, right? Some of you might know that there was a new Threads feature that was introduced. And Threads is a great way to basically kind of break off conversations, specific conversations from a main chat and funnel them to kind of sub chats, right? Subtopics. And it's a great way for something like a council where we at times would talk about a lot of things to branch off those topics so we can have very focused, central focused discussions and conversations on specific topics or multiple topics that we would have going on. So let me show this, right? Here's our Threads feature, and there's nothing active right now. Let me go to archive just to show you an example, right, of how many threads we have. These are all individual conversations over a period of time, right? These are for things that were not like the things that were already set in stone, that we already talked about in the jump phase or early on, that we were already going to do because everyone was on board. These are things that we are literally having conversations about to get people's opinions, to get people's feedback, to have some discussions on these things. And then, of course, when appropriate, have votes. You don't need to vote for everything, but when appropriate. And so this is all the things that we did, right? So it's unfortunate to me that and you can see all the people, and I'll just go into one as an example, right? You can see some of the people were later removed, but you can see here that initially everyone was, a part of these, and I'll just show maybe one or two more here. So we had an FZ amendment, right? Again, all the people that were here, again, all had conversations, again, all gave feedback here. This is just, right, two examples. This is something that Ghost had showed off in our big meeting as well. So there are multiple things that were being discussed where everyone was included, everyone had a voice, everyone shared their feedback, gave an idea. When we did votes, everyone gave their thoughts, and we filtered those and put them into the options to then vote on when we did those. So it's unfortunate to me when I hear things like that from someone like Mouse and from some others who have this false, again, I don't know if they've been lied to. Have you been misled? What are they telling you? Because that's just not the truth. Again, we don't publicize these things, but I hope that people would give me the benefit of the doubt. Like, yo, this is not my first rodeo. You know what I mean? Like, again, for any of you who have ate the poison apple, and you think that for whatever reason, I'm some kind of horrible dictator. It's just unfortunate. It really is, because, again, I could show you just mountains of evidence and proof that would completely refute that and show you quite the opposite, that I am just a big believer because of the amount of experience and knowledge I have in specifically, right? And this is just for one area of when it comes to managing kingdoms and servers. I just believe in a certain system. It doesn't mean that it's the only system that would ever work. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it's, well, yeah, I guess that's probably the best way of saying it. It doesn't mean it's the only way that you can manage a kingdom, but it is a system, after trying multiple systems, that I like and I'm very comfortable with because I've seen the net results, like we just showed you for when I was there leading. So then we get to the second part that she said, which is, we basically want you to give the direction, right? And this is something that I'm using Mouse as the example because she said it, but this is something that multiple other people feel the same way, right? That we're kind of in that up to 37 secretive backdoor group. And then says, we don't 100%, want you to, we want you to give the direction, give the mission statement, right? And then we will, at that time, manage, right? And really what she's basically saying there is, we just want you to say what you'd like for us to do. We will decide on if we want to do it. Like, that's all you had to say. That's really what it is. We don't need to sugarcoat it, right? But the challenge is that if you do it that way, who's to say that each of the alliances are actually going to move in unison, where you are synchronized? Because it could easily be a situation, which it has been since I left, and proof is in the pudding here, is it could easily be, well, hey, I'll give a direction, but then every alliance can just go and do their own thing. It doesn't mean that they're all going to do the same thing. That's where there has to be some level of guidance. There has to be some advisement and some clear direction that the leaders, it's not really a matter of following orders. It's more of a belief of, what, this person really is thinking about how they can make the best decisions. that are in the best interest of the player base, the officer team, the leads, and everyone here. And this person takes the time to explain their thoughts, their reasonings. They're always open to have a conversation. They're always open to hear anyone out. There's been times that people have came to me and have provided suggestions and thoughts, and I said, you know what? That's actually a really good idea. Let's expand on that. Or, hey, let's work on including that now. But it doesn't mean that we're just going to be a yes man and we're going to say yes to everything, right? And unfortunately, that is a little bit of what I've heard has happened from the recent council that has kind of led to the demise of the situation they're in right now. So now let me show you, we're going to listen to maybe one or two more audio clippings, and then we'll just show a couple posts here from Gen Chat. But let's listen to another one now, which is, let me see, I think this is at 11:22 that I have this at. And like I said, we're really just kind of covering the bulk of the stuff.
Overburdens yourself. And the power disparity that you're talking about now,
I think I have to go back a little. One sec.
I know what was discussed by countless players, and
maybe I have to go back so that way I can at least
in council chat. So I will fully admit that. But I know what was discussed by. Don't take this.
Correct me so that way I can at least comment or respond to, the accurate example.
I think you're getting. Don't take this the wrong way, but a misguided concept of what was proposed. I don't know what was talked about in council chat, so I will fully admit that. But
so I just want to briefly pause there after we found the appropriate starting. I thought it was there because there was a little bit of a pause before, but right, Shika admits, and who knows however many people would probably share the same sentiments there of he doesn't know what was talked about in council chat. So what that means is that in this backroom group deal, if you will, that was being made, right, for these up to 37 people that were mentioned by a few people throughout this meeting, is that possibly, or I shouldn't even say possibly, it's a guarantee that at least for some of the people that were included in that, and again, more than likely it was all officers because they don't have view for that, they would have had to been shared screenshots, or they would have had to been informed or told on what was discussed there. Shika here, as an officer, admits that he doesn't know what was talked about there. So a portion of where his perspective is coming from is that he doesn't know. Right, so there's kind of insinuations or inferences that would be made for some of the things that he's going to say.
But I know what was discussed by countless players, and it was not to spite you. Like, we need to be realistic here. You're kind of have full power on the server with the current structure. You have final say on everything.
Okay, so first and foremost, right, this is completely wrong. We've said this multiple times, right? I do not have final say on everything. What I've always told people, is that I just reserve the right to make a final call if and when necessary. Just as much as we will do votes if and when necessary. The majority, if I had final say on everything, then that means that we'd never have a discussion, we'd never have an open conversation, we would never do any of these things because I would just make the call myself. There'd be no need to hear other ideas, other feedback, other options, other choices that we could go down. And so, unfortunately, that's just not the case. There have been a few things in which have been presented, like I mentioned before, which we did actually work on and start to implement. I wish I could think of one right off the top of my head, which doesn't really add a lot of extra value to me saying this. But again, there has been a few things that have been added, which we did like. I guess one example that comes to mind now is us voting on the FZ amendment. This was actually, that is one. So I'll give you one example, which is one of the threads I showed you before. So we had this FZ amendment thing because players wanted to be able to farm gnomes inside the Forbidden Zone. Forbidden Zone was always the PvP zone because if in the FZ before 1.9, that's where you would go to get the highest level gnomes for the highest level drop rates on gear. At the time, it really wasn't the most efficient thing. Some players wanted to farm in there, Eric being one of them, a good friend, and he was being attacked by another player, and some other people attacked by other players. And so we thought, hey, yeah, this was something he reached out, and a few other people reached out to me and saying, hey, this is something that we'd like to see amended. And so one of the initial things I started to go and do was to find out and double check with one of my reps and say, hey, are there actual higher drop rates that are in the FZ? Because no one had, up until that point, had ever told me that. And so then we find out that, yes, we get a confirmation there is. We found an article that was showing it as well. And so once we got that confirmed, we started working on that FZ amendment to then make an amendment so people would be able to farm high at the highest level gnomes in the FZ for the highest drop rates. So that's just one example of something, which, again, disproves that point. But let's continue on.
In anything that overburdens yourself. And the power disparity that you're talking about now, that came from you being overburdened. And you've said this yourself. It also plays a factor of
I have.
You've asked for all this help. Brandon, I saw...
So before we get to the ask all the help portion, right? I don't know if I've ever told anyone that I have felt overburdened or I feel as though I am unable to do my job. I mean, there's a few people I was talking to on a daily basis, and I never said that. There might be things that, and I think anyone can see where I'm coming from on this one. When you're managing a lot of things, more often than not, you're prioritizing. What's the most important? What is the next deadline that's coming up? And what do I have to kind of do first and foremost, right? First, second, third, fourth. So you kind of put things into tier lists of number one is here's the things that I have the closest deadline to. Here's things I can push back and get to whenever I finish the most important things. And then you prioritize appropriately. The supposed burden that I had, I never felt burdened. So again, I'm not sure where that one's coming from. Oh, and excuse me, let me briefly say this as well on the final say portion. This is another way of looking at having a final say. Another way of looking at having a final say could be, you know what? Everyone had a chance to, we had a discussion, we collected all this feedback from everyone. Everyone had a chance to voice what they wanted to say. Everyone was included in a conversation. And at the end of that conversation, a decision had to be made on what to do. But everyone was able to say what they wanted. We had back and forth. We had dialogue. Maybe we got into a voice call to discuss it further. And everyone felt great about putting out on the table what they wanted to share, what they wanted to say. And then at the end of all that, a decision has to be made. And that decision, well, let me say that as well. If a decision actually has to be made, right? Now, if everyone is just leaning in one direction, I don't really call that a final say decision. I just call that, all right, well, everyone agrees in this, right? Let's go. If there was ever a situation that came up, which, again, I can't even recall if there was, where the majority of the leads at the time all publicly said, hey, we really want to go in this direction and do this. But then I came out and said, no, we're not going to do that, because that would be different and an example of when a final call or decision would need to be made, right, by me, where it's a matter of, because remember, and always keep this in mind, my position is a position of oversight. It's to remain objective and to make sure that what we are doing falls in line with what we promised people in not only the Jump Project phase, but what we promised people via Kingdom mails that we have sent out. So these are just important things to keep in mind. Now we're going to talk about the help portion.
A portion of it, I'm going to fully admit to you, the Discord section, I think that was kind of pointless. But a plan was created on how to more efficiently run the server so you could focus on what you're good at. And you could focus on making content rather than doing other stuff for the server. This wasn't some malice thing to try and knock you down or try and make you leave. It was more or less, hey, let's put our minds together and let's see how we could better run this. Because if we're all just gonna do one thing that's clearly not working, that's making people leave currently your alliance, which...
So here, this is pretty much the end of it. The portion here, right, so there's a couple things here, right? The first thing was mentioned was about overburdening with tasks. and that there was a list that was made. Let me briefly show that list. Let me see here. I think I have it. It's not this one. Ooh, I don't even know if I went over there. I think I was just playing the audio. I forgot to switch the OBS. But let me show you this wherever it is. Give me one sec. I think it's, oh, here it is. Okay. So here's a list of, and it has been, I think, a little updated here. But let me briefly show this off. I just want to make sure there's nothing really on here. Yeah, there's not. Okay. Okay, so here's a list that this is one of the things that was shared initially, right? Kind of listing out. Now, this is, some of these things are a little different now because it has been updated, but it does show, and I'll actually briefly show this, right? This was a portion of it as well, right? Kind of listing just an overall hierarchy, and then the template here, right? Which is what we're showing here right now, right? Same name as well, just so you know it's consistent. And these are things, this is essentially what Shika, Mouse, and a few others referenced, is that, right, you have all these people on these names, right, that are being attached here, and now there's all this assistance, there's all this help that is all of a sudden going to come. Now, let me also show you, right, where our task board was that we had, right, just so I can give you an example there as well. Now, if we look at the task board, here's our task board that we did. Ghost was the one who wrote this up, did a fantastic job here. He listed this out. If anyone wants to pick up any of these tasks, here's who you contact. Here's just some of them, right? And again, I want to point out, this doesn't include all the tasks. These are just more so like the more important ones that have to get done. These are things that at the time, people like Ghost and myself were the main people who were doing the bulk of the work when it came to the actual tasks in multiple areas that were being done, right? And some of the things that we have done, right, some of the things are on here that are just somewhat related, but then a lot of the things that we've done, like completed, are not on here, right? These are just active things that we'd like to get done. So, again, right, some things is, writing kingdom mails and ensuring these mails are sent by the current king, because for anyone who doesn't know, right, I basically wrote all the mails that have been sent in 79 up until, I think, whatever the last COR was that they sent mails out in, or some of them. Right, but if you ever saw it sent from someone, or if it was formatted a certain way, right, all those mails were written by me. And then I just provided those to the leads, right, so all they had to do was copy paste, pretty effortless. Right, create and or send alliance mail, server king's mails, manage in-game events, right, having someone who can kind of be a specific person that would lead those. They would make announcements about those things. They would do friendly reminders in-game, have someone who can manage the blacklist. An example of this would be like Embla, who ended up doing a great job of kind of managing our gift code section. She was always hunting codes down. She always updated it. Like, she stayed on top of it. Like, that one thing, again, she did other things too as well, but just as the most recent example, that one thing was like, bam, it was just always Gucci stuff. And let me see if I can give you an example here of gift codes, right? So she was the one who updated this all the time. You can see edited, right? So she would update it, put the most updated things at the bottom, and then she would post the most recent things and then work those way up. And I think that's great when you have someone, right? When you can have one person who just does like one thing amazingly well, right? The level of efficiency on individual things is at an all-time high, and then you're just raising the overall level of efficiency for the kingdom as a whole. But just to give you an example, right, these are just some of the things you'll find here on the task board. And this is something that when we go back to this server management sheet that you had a few people referencing to, that, and don't get me wrong, visually great, fantastic to see something like this that shows like what people are going to do, what, how these things work, right, who's kind of in charge of what, so to speak, or who's signing up for what. But what is actually being done, right? Remember, what I really equate this to is like a volunteer sheet, right? So let's say that let's say people are signing up, or they have a volunteer sheet to say, hey, well, next week we'd love to try and get some volunteers to go to the beach to help clean up trash. Let's say you have 100 people that sign up for that, right? Do you think every single person is going to show up? Probably not. Why? Because anything could happen between now and a week later on a certain day. Maybe an emergency comes up. Maybe something in the schedule shifts and now they can't make it anymore. So telling me that there's all these people that have signed up now and they're going to cover everything on the task board that we had listed, in short, is BS, right? Have a realistic expectation for the words that are coming out of your mouth. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Sure, is it great that you might have people that have signed up and have put their name down on something, But all they're doing is putting their name down on something to eventually do something, to eventually do that task, right? It's almost like putting your name on a reservation to go to dinner. You can put your name on the reservation, but that doesn't mean you're going to show up. Just as much as putting your name on a volunteer sheet doesn't mean you're going to show up to do the task, right? So again, that doesn't do anything for me. That doesn't show like what we wanted to see, which is what we've had multiple other people do. I'll give you a great example. There was a guy named Pete. I don't know if he's still playing in 79, but there was a guy named Pete. I had posted one day in our KVK chat, and I said, hey, I'd really love if someone can go through this chat and grab a few pieces of information. I'm going to see if I can find it too as well. But we posted asking this, and it was something that we asked if anyone can kind of go through this to figure out who the, like, something about power or something. Oh, here it is. Okay, so I did find it. Awesome. So here's a great example of someone who stepped up when we asked. And this is, again, one of the reasons, because other people asked us about this, which is why we incorporated the task board, which I think is a great idea. But we could maybe have sectionalized it off into different categories, right? But that's kind of neither here nor there. So let me show this real quick. So here's an example of someone like Pete, who I reached out and I said, hey, would someone be able to tally up some last minute data in KVK, right? I posted this on, let me click on this real quick. I posted this at 4:37 p.m. my time locally on this day, right? This was Christmas, shockingly. 4:37. This Pete gathered this information, which I later found out he did it on his phone, on a mobile, right? And he gave it to me pretty much 30 minutes later, right? A little more, about 30 minutes later. And it was just simply me asking, hey, can we get some information so we can put these things together and put them into a doc so we can use the information later? This is an example of someone who stepped up because we asked people, right? And there have been other situations of these happening as well, but this kind of ties right back into that task board, is that if people know what needs to be done, then they can kind of pick and choose what they'd like to do. Just because you ask people to sign a sheet that is a sign-up sheet, it's not a, hey, you're going to actually do this task sheet. It's you're signing people up. Until that task is done, right? That's all it is. It's just a sign-up sheet, right? When we have when we update people on that task board, that means you are doing it. You're currently doing it, right? Which was always the case for anyone that had signed up or for people that we had asked about certain tasks. If you reached out, it was because you were going to start doing it in that moment, right? You were going to do it that day, right? Or at least start, right? Begin the process. And that's just kind of how it's always been. I don't really know anyone who like signs up for something and they're like, hey, I'm going to do it in 2 weeks. That doesn't make any sense to me. In that case, sign up for something else, right? Something more appropriate to the timeline. So anyways, we get there, and that's kind of, I would say, I think the second part. Then the other thing was like they were doing it to help me make things run better, right? Like things weren't being ran well. People were leaving. At that time, there was maybe, I think, a few people that we heard that had migrated out at that time, right? Again, remember, up until the point of when I left, we were still on an amazing high. We had a lot of people that were still, we had other people that were still interested in coming into the kingdom. And we were at number 8 on the top server, or number 8. We had a balance of alliances as well, right? We had pretty much 8 active alliances, and within the top 6, we were, I think, all within about 10, 15 mil power of each other. So it was very balanced. Now you look at the boards, and again, right, that's just another thing where it's all over the place. So this is, I think, really important to understand, is that, again, if you, and this is the point I try to hammer home often, is that if you've never managed a kingdom, if you've never managed a group of people, right? I compare it to being like a district manager at your job, right? Where you're managing stores within that district. That means you're managing store managers, you're managing the assistant managers, you're managing the, I don't even know who else it would be, like a lead, so to speak, at that store, other people. You're looking at their stats, their metrics, you're having meetings. That's kind of what I do, to kind of give a comparative example. And the important part here is that if you've never done that job before, or if you've never been a part of maybe multiple, let's just say, kingdom leadership teams in different servers and different kingdoms where you've kind of worked your way up and you've seen how these different things can play out, right? Respectfully so, you just don't know what you're talking about, right? And that's not a general you don't know what you're talking about. That's more like to these individuals who came out thinking that they knew what they were talking about. Like, they were trying to do it for me, right? It was kind of like the breakup scenario. I think I said this during the meeting. It's kind of like when you're getting broken up and they give you the whole spiel of, it's not you, it's me. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to commit. It's too much, right? You're too good for me. That's what it is. You're just too good for me. I don't feel good. And you just like walk away. And I feel like it's the reverse of that almost, where it's, you're too burdened, right? You're doing too much. Let us lighten your load, right? There's just some things that aren't being done well enough. We just want to help make you better, right? We want to help do these things together better. And the challenge is that it sounds all well and good. It does. But look at what's happening now, right, on the kingdom, right? Where were all those tasks being done, right? What was actually being said? And so what I'm going to show off now, briefly, is the new Discord that they made. I just want to show a few things here, right? Because I think it's very important to show, some of the differences and to give you a good idea on, what were they actually doing, right? Okay, so let's go here, right? This is the new 79 Discord, and it starts here, of course, with the welcome, right? You got the verification, we got self roles, logs, and then we got announcements, right? So when we look here, right, let's just go to the top, right? So we'll just go to the very first announcement. This was made, so Eden made an announcement here a day later on the 5th, after I made the announcement. And then you have Wolf that he says, I'm sure many of you are aware, BN decided to step down. We just want to make sure you are aware of the change is due to a desire for the voices of the people to be heard. Interesting. The voices of the people. And I'm over here thinking to myself, it was just the leads who basically wanted to grab power and to, at the end of the day, be the actual decision makers. Wild, right? Just wild. I didn't know it was the voice. I didn't know they were speaking for this voice of the people. Wow, this is it's revelation. Okay. To be heard in decision making over just a single voice making all decisions, even though we proved and showed how it wasn't me making all decisions. In short, things seem crazy and turbulent at the moment, but going forward, the changes will be very minor. Oh, they're going to be very minor, are they? Wild. Man, I would imagine minor changes of everything going to shiitake mushrooms and the council being dissolved and the current leaders as such, that said they were only going to be making minor changes, ended up making not only more drastic changes, but did not stay long enough in the kingdom to see it become sustainable, is an inaction or non-change in and of itself. Wild thoughts here. Okay, and then you get to that, right? So there's the announcement, right? Just kind of looking at some of these throughout. Right, again, remember, this is an announcements channel, not a let's conversate channel, right? It kind of just shows the level of professionalism versus whatever this is. In short, I mean, let's be real, right? And I'll give you an example. Let's go back and let's just look at, right, some of the, where's Kingdom Mail, right? Here's some, and I'm just talking before I even made the announcement, right? Here's how I do announcements. Right, and you can see there's format, there's spread, right? They're clean, and it doesn't mean you have to use this doing it this exact way, but there's method to the madness, right? You can see here a lot of the announcements are very consistent, and more importantly, you have to understand your announcement channel is something you want the most amount of people to read. You don't want to dilute it with really non-announcements because then people just think you're messing around, right? Just a bunch of kids, and so you can see here that these things are, really important for how we format things, for how we talk about things. And then, and again, that's just my belief, and I'm always going to feel that way. Like I said, it doesn't matter about the format, but you see kind of just like the general conversations and talk, like this is an announcement channel. Take it serious. Treat yourself seriously, right? And more so the way that you want to be presented and viewed by others. So we have a new update here. We got a server meeting, and right, for the first 30 minutes, right, please post any concerns, right? This is kind of keeping the meeting short. And then you have some meeting minutes here, right? You have something that they ended up changing back, which was the FZ. And then we kind of get to where they're at now, which is, again, making something here, just kind of giving some feedback. But if we look at some of the other channels, right? Like, where's the task board channel? Why haven't there been any general announcements on things like state of affairs, right? I don't see any announcements here about how the kingdom's going, when COR is coming, how are we going to take these? Are we not taking COR? What big events are coming up? Are we doing any big city sieges? Anything. There's really nothing here. It's almost like kind of general announcements, either about a meeting, an update, or, again, appreciation, some general conversation. Like, what is actually happening? Like, this is not what I would view as a announcement channel for how you would use it. So then we get to like some of the other things here outside of the meeting stuff. I mean, this is fine, but one of the big things that they pointed out during the voice call was about the task board, about how all these things are now all of a sudden going to get done, right? Because they had all these people sign up, and however many people might have told them, yeah, we're going to do these things. But why don't we see a channel here that talks about what's being done? Why is there nothing here? Like, that was one of your big points that you hit on in the meeting. But why aren't you talking or showing people, right? Like, you would imagine that if that was a big contention or a big point of the meeting, you would want to show people, right? You would want to be like, yeah, let's stick it to boss, so to speak, or let's show them that we are doing these things. But why wasn't that ever talked about? Why didn't you ever show that, right? It's so easy to do that, right? All you got to do is get some people to sign up, and then things are going to get done. But I digress. So right now you're in like this really interesting situation of where, and I know I'm already a little over 45, 46 minutes here, of, in short, to conclude, what we saw here was a simple as you can put it, a grab for power. You can dress it up however you want, but it was people who felt, for whatever reason, that they just wanted to be the person or the group of people that were able to, in their minds, make all of the decisions without anyone else saying anything to them at all. They rounded up a group of people, as they said, up to 37, which I would imagine is probably the majority of the officers from each of those alliances, and maybe some members, some popular or popularly viewed members, if that, and got them all together, had the secret backroom meeting and deal for however long, and came out with a loaded deck of cards and a loaded proposal or proposed proposal, and basically wanted to see changes done. Now, I don't know about any of you, but when something like that is done, you've basically killed all the trust. You've killed all the faith. As I mentioned, none of them ever came to me about any of those things. And of course, if anyone, feels that they did, I'd love to see some evidence, of course. I'm happy to retract. But from there, after you've lost all that trust and all that faith, why would someone then continue to keep playing there? Why would they continue to support and keep investing all the time that they had been up until that point, doing all of these things that they were doing before, right? That to me is just asinine, which that's probably the best word to really describe it, right? It's almost as though, and I said this in the meeting, it's almost as though they want their cake and they want to eat it too. Right? Where, yeah, look, we just don't want you to really help us, but we kind of want you to help us. We just don't want you to have the final say. We want to be the ones to have the final say. We want to have the voting power to push through whatever we want to push through without you being there. But we still would love to hear from you. Just sit over here, like in that chair over there that's on the end of the football field, and can you just shout out to us what you would like or what you think we could do? And then, we'll just, we'll listen, but, we're just going to do what we want to do anyways. That's basically what it was. And now you look at where they are now, and yeah, dude, karma's a B, man, because you just didn't know what you were doing. And it's okay that you didn't know what you were doing, but just admit it. Like, just, have some self-awareness to know that you bit off more than you could chew, right? Whether you want to call it, you thought you could do me and be me, but you weren't able to, or you thought that you could fill in my shoes and everything that I did, but you couldn't, or you thought really truly deep down in your heart and your soul that things were just going so bad, that the kingdom was doing so bad that the only option we actually had was to take boss out of power. But even that didn't work. So I want to point this out, that, and this is the most important bit here, is as much as I joke or I'll poke and make fun at, to make a point, right? You're never going to hear me just randomly telling someone, shouting anything derogatory or, being completely disrespectful to someone in those ways. Right? Sure, I might do it colorfully as much as a comedian might, but I'm doing it to make a point and to show you evidence and to show you supportive material that backs this, along with what we're seeing now in this kingdom, is that if you are someone who's ever had something like this happen to you, I would love, and I'm not just saying happen to you as in to me, but if you've ever been someone who's noticed this in a kingdom, a server you've played in, where, like we said, it was going well, and then for whatever reason, people were, the regime switched, and then it wasn't going as well. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is anything that I've said here today connecting with you, right? It doesn't matter if it's an Infinity Kingdom or another game, but these are unfortunate realizations. And I know someone might say, well, boss, really all you had to say was just no and replace them, right? And replace the leads. I will tell you that would have been the worst thing to do, right? Because at that point, it would have been, at that point, then they could have came out and said anything, right? Like, boss is really going full dictator at this point, right? Which still would have been fully in my right based on the expectations that we set appropriately for everyone on day one for what I could do. But it is wild to me that that's just not something that I would do, right? Like the moment that you spat in my face is the moment that you've lost all my respect, right, and my support and my trust. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Is that all of that was lost the moment that the proposed proposal came out in the way it did. And then just hammered home more so during the meeting. So it's unfortunate, but I hope this is a good lesson to maybe a good learning opportunity for any kingdoms or servers out there. If you face something similar, right, or even if it's closely related, hopefully this is that heed of caution. That sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and sometimes the people that are there really know what they're doing. And sometimes the approach should be follow along, learn, but more so believe. Believe in it, right? Don't just, and that might have been poorly worded in the beginning, don't just follow to follow, right? Be a part of that journey to learn to understand what is happening, what is going on, why are things being done a certain way, and see how it plays out. Because remember, from everyone's eyes publicly, we're a number 8 server. Alliances are balanced. We have great activity. We actually did very well in our first KVK, despite not taking the offer to take Gnome Capital for the visual win. And sometimes it feels as though all of that means nothing when it comes to a few things that this coup d'etat regime group felt that things weren't being done, or that things were being neglected, or they could do things better. Remember, I lasted 5 months still on an upward direction, never slowing down, right, with what I was doing for the server and the direction we were going. This group lasted about half that time, and fell apart. And one of the big reasons why, and I'll say this, and I don't know how much this will connect with people, but it is the truth, is that because they went to a pure council system and they made these drastic changes without really having a good vetting time for how each of them feels and what their individual philosophies, beliefs, and visions are for the server, that is one of the main things that led to what has transpired. Is that it's like too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Everyone wants to be the lead. And what is it, like? There's not enough ponies or something like that. There's someone will tell me in the comments exactly what that saying is, and that's more or less one of the big things that factored into it. And so again, sometimes it can be really good to have oversight, to have someone that isn't just always going to be your yes man. And I hope this is a good lesson learned, because whether or not you want to agree with it, this is exactly what happened. And I've spent the last almost 55 minutes now here showing people how it did happen. So it is unfortunate, but I do hope that people will take away from this some of those red flags, some of those things to think about, and to just really be willing to have a conversation, to have communication, and to be open-minded enough to know that there can be things that you just don't know, or that you're not familiar with, or you don't have enough experience in, and you can lean on some people while you're having those conversations, right? Whether you're proposing something, suggesting something, giving some feedback, right? And you can tell, anyone can tell the people that are open to feedback, that are open to having a conversation, right? And that are the people who are the yes men, and the people who are like, you know what, I'm really gonna think about what you're saying, and deciding if it is something truly that is going to be in the benefit of the kingdom based on where we're going. Because remember, no one knows how 79 should operate, right, better than me. But why is that? It's because I created the project. So everything's up here, right, on what my views were, goals, how to manage, how to balance power, how to recruit, everything. And the task when you're starting a project is always to lay out that information as eloquently as well as you can. And that's why, more often than not, you're usually answering a lot of questions, right? Because people that are coming in to be leads, officers, members, they want to have a good understanding too. So whenever they read something that you put out, right, you can make the argument that the amount of questions you'll get on that could be with either how well it is worded, where it answers more questions than it requires for someone to ask, or generates for someone to ask, or if they just might have an opposition or a different view on it. So anyways, that is pretty much it for me. Again, this has been a long video, like I said, I've been waiting to make, which I guess kind of sucks to even say that, to be waiting to make, really, because my hope, I think, for every kingdom, every server, is that they figure it out, that they are able to. Like I said, waiting to make is more so of me just waiting to see the direction that the kingdom was going to go in, right? Again, were they going to be able to pick the pieces up, sustain themselves, stabilize, and thrive? Or will it be kind of stumbling at picking the pieces up, and then it just eventually crumbles? And the latter is unfortunately what ended up happening. So yeah, with that being said, that's it for me. Now, if you are someone who's in 79, like I said, I would also love to hear from you, right? And I will pose this question, because I am curious on what people think. With everything you know now, with everything how you're seeing transpiring, do you still feel that the decision that group made to go about things the way they did, to where I was forced out, voted out, do you still think it is the right decision? And then anything else that you want to add to that, with maybe what your experience has been like. Again, for those of you that really paid attention to how I went about doing things, maybe comparing it to what was currently being done, maybe things you noticed, right? Did you have hopes in the beginning? Did you think, yeah, man, this thing was going to be great? All these things are going to get done now. Like, what did you really think? Honestly, earnestly, I would love to hear. So let me know anything and everything in the comments down below. Again, I'll respond to as many as I can as well. And as long as you're not just being, complete out disrespectful and just, posting derogatory things, right? Again, I'd love to read those, of course, right? Doesn't matter if you are in favor or in disfavor, you agree, you disagree with me or anything I've said. If it is something that is respectful, again, I'd love to hear it, right? No matter what way it goes. Okay, that's it. I'm done. Until next time, I'll catch you later.